I'm asking the question, who is teaching our children? And the reason I'm asking this question is because I was watching our three granddaughters recently, just engrossed in this TV program, and thought about how much influence that program was having on them. And it was a healthy program. It was nothing to be concerned about. And then I started to think about the various ways that our children are being influenced, the various directions our children are being influenced from. And so to try and encourage parents in this field, because there's things coming from every direction to try and influence them, I've invited Katie Thomas to come and join me. And Katie's got a real heart for children. She's got children of her own, but she's got a real heart for this area of family and children, etc. So, Katie, I just want to thank you for taking the time to come and join me. Okay, because as a mum, you will be busy, no doubt of that. Is it 3 children you've got?
I've got a daughter, she's 11,
Right.
and 2 boys who are 9 and 6, nearly 7.
Okay, so you got 3 kids. So just introduce yourself then, Katie, if you would. As far as the family is concerned, and where you're ministering, would you?
Yeah, of course. So hi, I'm Katie. I am living in Sarn, which is just north of Bridgend.
Mhm.
My husband, I'm married to a guy called Rod, and he's the pastor of a small church plant that we've been part of now for nearly 4 years. And I've got 3 kids at home, but I'm also a childminder, so I have extra kids in the home on various days of the week. Um, and I also work for our church plant as the community and families worker.
Lovely, lovely. So I think I've chosen well to get the right
Mm.
guest on.
All
In
right.
fact, in all fairness, it was Lois Franks that sort of put your name forward, and we've chatted, and I think it's going to be great. So let me just start with that question then, Katie. Let's have a little look at what the main areas are that our kids are being influenced from. Because there's a number of things that potentially are able to influence our kids, various directions. So what are the
Mm.
ones that you've sort of identified, you and Rhodri have identified?
Yeah, so I think there are a number. I do think that if you are purposeful and kind of carefully parenting, then by far the biggest influence is the home, the family, um, on children, particularly under primary school age.
Yeah.
Um, but other kind of increasingly large influences on children, I think, is social media.
Yeah.
So you mentioned television, but I think that the internet, YouTube, uh, some of the kind of social media platforms are becoming uh, more and more kind of significantly kind of powerful as an influence on children today.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, there's other influences as well: school, friends, wider family, clubs, and things. So whatever your child is doing, whatever they're spending their time, wherever their heart is where there's going to be an influence, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah. Their peers as well. You know,
Mm,
they engage with other children, and depending
yeah,
on
of course.
the home that the other child comes from, that's a potential sort of influential area as well, isn't it? So,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
it is the home really that, as you say, I agree with you. It's the home that's the greatest influence, and that's what I want to try and bring out of this is to encourage parents that they recognize the home is already the place of greatest influence, but to encourage them from a Christian perspective that God is on their side in shaping
Mm.
their kids, really. So, but before we get into that, just, you know, it's a concern for parents how children are being negatively influenced from some of those directions, whether it's social media, whether it's TV. So, what are your concerns? You and Rhodri, what are your concerns? What concerns have you discussed? And
I guess one of the things that concerns us with our own children, with children that we know, is the effects of the internet and the kind of the rise in phones and kind of ready technology that's at
yeah,
children's hands from a young age. Um, I do think that particularly things like YouTube, and when a child becomes really fixated on following somebody, an influencer, that kind of thing, that person, even though they've never met them, they're just a face on a screen, they're having a direct kind of channel into that child's kind of heart, into the things that they're going to put value on. And I've seen children becoming increasingly kind of changed or influenced by what they're watching in their bedroom on their phone. And obviously that wasn't the case when I was a child. That those things weren't available to us. So the peers, the school level was the biggest influence, I think, that you might, as a parent, need to be concerned about. But now we've got these voices that are speaking in our own homes, when, you know, in our own walls, so to speak, there might be these negative influences on our children. That's something that I think is really important to be aware of as a parent, is kind of, who's my child listening to, who are they hearing from, when they're relaxing, I guess, and when they're watching TV or when they're going on the internet, whatever it is.
Because, you know, the directions that children can be influenced from are increasing. Well, have increased, certainly since since I was a child, but even since you were a child, you know, the directions are increasing, and I think the threat is getting worse as well. With, you know, as the number of directions increases, you know, internet, YouTube, etc., then the threat that can come through that is increased as well. And, you know, that's my concern, that's your concern, that's the concern of, I would say, most parents, you know, Christian or not. That's the concern of most parents, and that's why I'm grateful to you that we're sort of looking at this topic. So recognizing, you know, the potential negative effects, the negative influences that can come, what do you and Rhodri do to try and mitigate those, to try and sort of defend your kids in a way from those?
Yeah, that's a helpful question. There's probably a couple of lines on this that I would want to kind of explore, I suppose. So there's maybe the more kind of practical things of what we do as a family, kind of our ground rules. And I'd say every parent's got to work out their own ground rules for that. Of, you know, you can't just go, oh, that family does that, so we're going to do it like this. So because I suppose there'd be a temptation, I think, to just be like, no screens, we're just going to cut it out completely. And Rhodri and I have discussed that at length, I suppose, along the way. And we've actually got two scriptures that we kind of have really helped us in our kind of parenting thinking.
Okay, that's useful. Okay.
So they're probably quite classic ones that lots of people might know, but one is Proverbs 22 verse 6, train up your child in the way he should go. And the other is Ephesians 6 verse 4, fathers, don't exasperate your children, instead bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. And we just feel like there's a balance between those two verses. So train them up in the way they should go, direct them, like lead them, but don't exasperate them. And I think that's really important, because there's that it's easy as a Christian parent, I think, to perhaps be like, I know the best, this is what we're going to do. But we want to walk in that tension of like, don't lead your kid to anger, don't be so authoritarian, don't just cut stuff out so that they're going to feel like being a Christian kid is the worst. You know, we want our kids to be like, I love being in my family, it's really fun, my parents care for me, they've put these safe boundaries in, but they also enjoy stuff. That's kind of, do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah, that's brilliant.
So, and I think that that's something to think about in all areas of life, but I think that counts, that's something we wanted to apply to kind of screens and TV. So so for us, we have kind of guidelines that we as a family meet. So we don't have screens whenever they want. We have a set screen time once a day. And they have to be in the lounge together, so they're not all off in their rooms with the screens. So they're together. So there's a sense of accountability, because they're not, if if anyone was to start listening or looking at something unhelpful, one of the others would be like, oh, we're not allowed to do that. So they're not alone in it. They're not up in a room kind of having some voice speaking in with no one else about. If that makes sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah.
Because
there's that practical side of it that you're saying, okay, where you give them screen time, and there's the balance with the spiritual side of that you're teaching the children in the way they should go, but not making it tough to be a child in a Christian home. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Not making a rod for our own back. Kind of, we don't want them to resent us. We don't want them to think being a Thomas was just terrible. We didn't have anything. And I think it's also important as a Christian to recognize that secular things can be good, that there is good to be found. So if you're watching a movie together, perhaps there's a not nice element to the story, but can you find the gospel kind of meaning in it? Like a lot of children's films, you can apply a kind of gospel, and you can be like, oh, that's like when Jesus forgave us, or and so you can be speaking life into secular things for your children. So it's about, I think, being present with them and being kind of switched on to the things that they're interested in, and also then we do say no. There are things they're not allowed to watch. There are games they're not allowed to play. Their friends are playing them. I mean, for instance, my 6-year-old's friends are playing Fortnite. That's a 12 game. He's not going to be playing that for another 6 years. He might not play that ever. I don't know. We haven't thought about it yet. But there's hard rules of there are no's that come. But it's good to also be able to say yes sometimes, isn't it? So there are things that we try and enjoy together as a family as well.
And it's hard to say no, because you want. It is hard to say no, but when your kids appreciate you saying no for their own good, which they may not understand at a young age, but when they look back and say, my mum and dad said no for my sake, then they start to appreciate the no's. Because, again, this is something that's been on my mind for years, is that putting boundaries is actually an act of love towards a child.
Oh, yes. Yeah, loving boundaries is a really important part of the parenting that I think we're trying to apply. And I think especially as well, explaining those boundaries is really helpful. So so that the children don't just think that you're this authoritarian that just wants to kind of rule their life. But we were watching a film. We have a Friday night movie night sometimes, and we started a film that we were all quite excited about on Disney Channel. And after about 7 minutes in, me and Rod looked at each other and we were like, "Oh, this one's not for us." And we turned it off, and we explained why. And I think sometimes you have to kind of frame things for your children. So I explained, well, Mummy started watching a grown-up film the other day and decided that Jesus wouldn't like it, and I turned it off. And we don't think this is helpful for us to be watching as a family now. So that you're showing that you're not just doing it it's for them, but you're doing it in your life too. And you're trying to help them to grow in their Christian walk. So it's not just a kind of, this is a you thing and I can watch whatever I want. But they're seeing that you're modeling it for them for the future as well.
Yeah. And I appreciate that what you're sharing is, and you've already touched on this, what you're sharing is what you and Rhodri have decided is good for your family, and that you're not and that you're not giving a blueprint for other families, other parents. But what you're sharing, Katie, is really, really useful. Honestly, I'm humbled by what you're saying in that, the way that you're approaching this. And I'm sure other parents who will be watching it will, even if it's picking up one or two things, here and there, are going to find value in this, because what you're sharing is of value. Okay. I want to encourage you in that. Really, really, it is of value.
And I think we can also learn from mistakes as well, because I don't think we get this right all the time. And there've been times when we've let them do something or play a game and we've thought, oh, I'm not sure about that. And I would say, even being full disclosure, I worry, are we getting this right? Are they doing too much? So it's an onward process, but I guess that's what parenting is you're always reassessing, but it's about keeping on thinking and connecting in with what they're doing, and continually not just kind of resting on our laurels, but continually being actively thinking about your decisions. So
what about other things that you do, as far as, you know, the practical working out of this, of making sure that the negative voices aren't getting through to your kids? Anything else?
Well, I do think that obviously the kind of key thing that you can be doing as a parent is to be building a really strong bond between you and your child, when they've got that key relationship with their parents. I think that, like, so it's almost like you have an emotional bank account. Your child has an emotional bank account. You can tell I've done the Care for the Family parenting course. But, and if you're filling it regularly with praise, with connection, with them feeling secure in the family that they're placed in, with love and kindness, with time together, all those things that fill up your child, so that when there's the negative influences of the world, perhaps someone's unkind to them at school, or they're hearing things that they're not sure about, all those things, like, they've got kind of resources, they've got
They
the
can draw on their,
resilience there. Does
they
that
can
make
draw on
sense?
their
They can draw
savings.
on it.
They can draw on their
Yeah,
savings what's already been put
yeah,
in.
exactly. And I think as well that that connection with your child, that they can talk to you, is so important, isn't it? So that you can be saying, oh, when we were at that thing, I heard somebody say this. What did you think about that? You know, if and you can be discussing the thing, because you'll be aware of the influences on your kid. You'll be aware of some of the friends, perhaps what they're talking about, or other family members, whatever it is that you're concerned about. It's keeping in conversation with your child about it. So I think the other thing that practically we do to try and I guess bolster our kids against the negative impacts of the world and the things around them, is to just really feed them up with God's word as a family. So we start the day at breakfast with Bible time. That's normally a bit of a shorter devotion. And then at bedtime as well, you read the Bible with the children. So that, I guess, if you're starting and ending your day with God's word, we can be applying it then to situations. They know the Bible, and then as something happens, we can be like, oh, that happened today. That makes me think about this thing in the Bible we read, and they can be like, oh yeah. So that they've got the word of God as that sword ready to kind of take on life's challenges, really.
Yeah, brilliant. What have you, as parents, learned about the importance of the home as the main place of influence for your children? Is that a fair question to ask you? Because, you know, it's the thread throughout this. I appreciate that. But is there anything that stands out to you as to, you know, why this is so important for children?
Parents that are kind of living out their faith is so key for children in terms of influencing them in taking on faith as their own, as in standing in a mature faith themselves. And I do think even from very early on, young children as well, they're watching your, you know, if you, your kids are going to be the ones that will most know where your flaws are, where your hypocrisies are, when you're not practicing speech to them, they're going to see it. So you want them to be seeing you actively seeking a deeper relationship with God, actively walking in faith. And if they see that, and they see that and they see the way that you love them and the way that you're caring for them, they're going to see it. So it's going to be like a cementing of faith for them, isn't it?
Yeah. There's so many questions that are coming, which are, you know, sort of coming up for me as I'm listening to you, Katie, in that, you know, you and Rhodri are really fully immersed in planting a church and taking a church forward. And that can sometimes lead to children losing out, you know, because the parents' focus is so much on taking the church forward. But I think God has given you as Christian parents in this instance as much importance on the family and the children as he does on leading the church. Because sometimes we can think the church, is really important, and we tend to, because they don't complain, push the kids to one side to a degree. But that's wrong. That's wrong. I don't believe that's sort of God's plan. Yes, he's called you to plant a church and be fully immersed in that, but also to take the responsibility as Christian parents and to walk that side by side. Is that a fair observation, do you think?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think it's a real challenge for all parents in ministry. I'm reading this book at the moment. I don't know if you want to see it. Am I allowed to?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
It's called Parenting as a Church Leader.
Oh, wow.
By
Okay. So somebody's been through this before. Yeah.
So you've really hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
It's really, really good book. So if that's of interest to anyone, I'd recommend that. But yeah, there is a real challenge, I think, that I'm hyper aware of, really, of kind of how do we make sure that when you're leading a church, you're making space for your own children, because every other child in the building has come as a child with their parent, who's there to be a parent as well as to receive from God. But we're obviously there working, leading, trying to be serving a servant to everyone else. And it's very easy to think, well, I've taken my parent hat off right now because I'm leading the church. And it's important to remember that we've got to be parents whilst we're also leading. So that is something that definitely feel I've got a lot to learn about. I think God was really kind to us because we planted in COVID. Like we moved and then the lockdown happened. So the early stages of our church plant was during the COVID and the lockdown. So home was really central to everything we were doing. So the children were very much part of it. And they do have a really lovely ownership of the church, and they really, really care for the church, and it's where they're most confident, which is really nice to see, because they're naturally quite shy. But I think something about the fact that they've been there from the beginning, they've prayed, they've chatted. We try and share our heart for the church and some of our ministry ideas and things around the dinner table, so that they kind of feel that shared ownership, so that when it's all we've got to do this for the church, they think, oh yeah, that's part of me and I'm part of that. It's not just mummy and daddy are doing it. Hopefully it's the Thomas family are called here, and we're called to the school, and they're part of that. And, so that they are on a shared mission. And our hope and our prayer is that will, I guess, give them such a depth of kind of heart and relationship for Jesus from a young age that God will kind of use that as they grow up. So
and I think as well, this is not your intention. Okay, your intention is to raise kids who love Jesus first and foremost. That's your intention. But you may well be shaping church planters of the future as well. With your kids.
I hope so.
Which is remarkable, really.
The hope, isn't it, of a Christian parent, is that your child will have a deeper and more rich and more faith-filled life with Jesus than you do. So that's our prayer for them anyway. So hopefully they'll.
I want to just take the conversation towards another big influencer, which is school at the moment. Okay, but before we do that, I just want to, with one of the reasons I was keen to do this podcast is to just encourage parents, whether they're Christian or not, but to encourage parents that the home is the greatest influencer of children. What the parents put into the children, etc. And also to encourage Christian parents that God is on their side with regard to this, and he's got wisdom. And even though, no matter what the pressures of the influences that come from the other directions, God's word is a source and a shield against those, and his wisdom that for Christian parents to be able to raise up their kids. I wish I'd have known more about this subject when, Jill and I were raising our kids. We don't feel we did a bad job, but we could have done a better job. But, we didn't know what we know now. But I just want to sort of emphasize that to any parents, Christian parents that are watching this, that there is a source, there is a wisdom in the word, there is also a shield that will help. Because we all want kids who are balanced and whole and, and if we take God's blueprint as revealed in the word of God, we've got a better opportunity of hitting that bullseye. Am I right to say that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think that our relationship with Jesus and a knowledge of the word is going to massively influence our parenting for the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to draw on his love. We're going to be fueled to do a great job because we know that he's given us our kids as a responsibility and a gift, and we want to serve him by doing our very best to care for them well and to bring them up to know him. So there's loads of reasons why I think that's true.
Yeah, so the home is central. So let's just look at school briefly, really, okay, because that's another big influencer. Is school the second biggest influencer, or is social media the second biggest influencer? Would you say, in your in your experience, in your opinion? It's a major influencer, school.
Yeah,
that's why I want to look. That's why I want to look at it. But is it the second greatest influence, or?
I think for my children, I think it is the second greatest influence after the home. Yeah, I think so. Well, I hope actually that that's not true. I hope that it's home, then church, then school. And I think that church should and can have a huge influence on our children. But I think for some, probably, sadly, social media is probably the biggest influence on a child. There are probably children out there being brought up by the internet, sadly. But I hope that's not the case for ours. But yeah, school is a big influence, I suppose. But it's been a real blessing for us as well.
So you're an advocate of state school, aren't you? Of sending your kids to not just to school, which you have a responsibility, but to state school. You don't homeschool. Tell us a little bit about why you and Rhodri took that decision to, because there are influences within a state school that can influence our children in a way that is not biblical. Okay, but yet, as Christian parents, you and Rhodri have taken the decision, no, we're sending our kids to state school. What's behind that? Can you share with us?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, for us, there were a lot of good reasons to send our children to school. Yeah, obviously, I know some amazing homeschoolers who do a brilliant job. But I think we both feel that school would be the best place for our children. I think there's a slight danger as Christians of thinking anything non-Christian is bad, and that school is non-Christian, so it's going to be a bad influence. And actually, I think the work that a lot of teachers and a lot of schools do is amazing. Some of the ways that school influences my children is really for the good. They learn about sharing, they learn about treating each other equally, no matter the background, no matter the race, the religion, like so many different diversities and ethnicities that are being treated as one and cared for. They learn to support students that struggle more with their learning. They're learning kindness. Like there's a lot of things that the schools are doing that are excellent and that we've seen and thought, oh, that's really good, and that's back up. So we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater sometimes, I think. And I think there can be a real fear of perhaps some of the more kind of progressive thinking that's perhaps coming in, that our kids are going to be indoctrinated. And that certainly hasn't been the case for us. Also felt that school would be good for our kids socially, and it's been excellent for us in terms of ministry and outreach. So we moved to San, not knowing anybody at all. We got stuck in at the school, and it's been a really great way for us to make friends. It's been a really great way for us to kind of meet people for evangelism. We had a lot of people from the school come along to church, to events, things like that, and we've been able to partner with the school. So I think if you're willing to kind of get involved with the school, you can be a positive influence on the school as an outlet. So we've run Christmas carol concert there. We're hoping to partner with them on some Easter assemblies and things. I'm currently running a parenting course in the school. So it's been really amazing to kind of be able to be a light and a witness in the school. There's nearly 500 children. We don't know any other Christians in the school. So if we weren't there, who's going to tell that school about Jesus? So, for us, it's been a positive thing in terms of being in the world, I guess.
This is not a one size fits all.
No, absolutely.
Every parent has to send their kids to state school. Every Christian parent needs to homeschool. It's not a right and wrong. It's a personal decision, preference that you as parents, and only you as parents, can make. Because I will be recording this same interview with a homeschooler, not to sort of bounce one off the other, but just to give those two different perspectives to help and encourage parents on that journey. Okay, what is right for me? And the way that you have explained why you and Rhodri have chosen state school is great, really is great. And I do think that it would be wrong of you, in your case, not to, because you're having that place of bringing Jesus. You're having a position of influence on other children and on the school, which is exactly what we're talking about. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it definitely is a personal decision. Every child is so different. Every home is so different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely respect all sides, kind of the school homeschool kind of arena.
Arena. I like that, because you didn't use the word argument, because it's not an argument.
No, it's not an argument.
Yeah,
it shouldn't be.
exactly.
And Christians, there's so many. As a Christian, we've always got to make decisions, haven't we, about so many areas of life, and we can just do what we feel we're being led into. I would say that I think school can also be a really good arena for our children to kind of grow in faith and take those like baby steps with us, holding their hand, if you like. So we were going to ask about, I guess, some of the influences of school. And I think that if our children are in school, that they're, from a very young age, they are being exposed to some other ideas, some other world views and points of view and religions, but that's not necessarily a bad thing from my perspective.
I can see it. Yeah.
I've seen the value of that. I've seen them be more well-rounded. They're not just having my sometimes biased, sometimes skewed viewpoint. They're having other people's, so they're forming their own ideas. But I've also think that it's been really helpful for them in terms of grounding and living out their faith, because I think if they were just with me at home and I was telling them these things, Jesus is the only way, and all that, they wouldn't have anything to base that on, whereas they are seeing some of the world, some of the consequences of sin, some of the more difficult things, and we are able to keep talking about that in age appropriate ways from a young age. And I think they can kind of already sometimes see that God's way is best. We have a little phrase, so that if they say, "Oh, mummy, such and such, this person does this in their family," we say, "Oh, they might do that, but we don't believe that's God's best plan. Because we don't want to be telling them at 4 years old like they're wrong and like God's going to judge them. That would be totally the wrong thing to do. So we say, our family, we believe that in the Bible and we're living things out God's way, and we don't believe that's God's best plan. And I think that I really feel passionate about this, and I want to make sure I get it articulated well. It's school and being kind of seeing some of the realities of the world, I think, can help them to really live out their faith in a real way.
That's what I can hear you saying. Yeah.
And count the cost, even, because I think there's a huge cost to following Jesus, isn't there? As an adult, there's a huge cost. And I think that we need our children, although it's scary, we want them to be learning to do that in small ways as a child, so that when it's the bigger things that they're going to have to count, when it's, I'm going to have to stand out in the workplace and say, no, I won't do that because it's not what Jesus wants me to do, or whatever, that they've almost had the training wheels off and they're ready for that. Brilliant. So if it's, my 6-year-old can't play Fortnite, for instance, or we won't take part in Halloween because as a family we're following Jesus and we believe in the light, not the darkness, and we're going to follow him. Like, that's a hard thing at 5. Everyone else is going to the Halloween party and I'm not, but that's going to help them when it's, well, everyone else is taking drugs at 15 and I'm not, so that to have the strength and to have already counted the cost on some of the smaller things, to be ready to kind of count the cost on some of the bigger things as they grow up.
Excellent.
So
excellent.
I think we can kind of want, when they're little, to help them to fit in, and help them to I have this conversation with mums at school, actually, because it can be everyone's got this coat or this hat or this backpack, and we want them to fit in when they're small, but when they're older, we're telling them not to fit in. Don't smoke when everyone else is smoking, or don't do that thing.
Wow.
So we actually want to be preparing them now in the little years to have the strength of character and to have the confidence to stand out in the small things, so that when it's the big things, they're ready and they're strong. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because one of the scriptures you referred to earlier was train your child in the way he should go and they won't depart from it. So what you're doing now is you're training them in the way of being able to stand for what is righteous, stand for what is biblical, and so it's a little bit of a training ground for those big decisions that come later. And then the other thing I've seen as well, Katie, is we've talked about the home, and it's only the home as the major influencer that can enable them to do that. Because if the home is not the major influencer, is not giving them that foundation to be able to stand, then you're on a little bit of a sticky wicket, really, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it has to be that they've got that complete safety blanket of home to fall back on, so that if it's tough in school, or if it's tough with a friend in a club, if they don't go to school, whatever it is, that they like, I know home is safe. I know that's the place where I'm being loved unconditionally. Like, there's grace for me. There's security. There's routine. There's all those good things, so that they can stand outside of home. And I need that consistency of, like, we're living out God's word every day. It can't be that, like, we're Sunday Christians, that, like, most of the week we forget about Jesus, but on a Sunday we're like, oh yes, we're following Jesus. If you're not kind of practicing and living out God's word together corporately as a family through the week, they're not going to stand up in school and say, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Or at 15, they're not going to think, oh yeah, I want to follow Jesus when all my friends are going out clubbing. Like, the home needs to be the place where Jesus is made central every day, and following him and his kingship over your family is so clear that then when they go out in the world, they've got that, like, an anchor, I suppose, to be like, no, I know I'm one of Jesus's followers. I know I'm living in for him. I know that my family stands for him. So I'm going to stand against this thing now. So the family needs to be such a hold on them that they don't want to depart from it, that they're like, my family is good. I love being part of the Thomas family. I don't want to reject that. I don't want to go a different way because I can see the value of it.
I love listening to you, Katie. And as I say, if Jill and I, because I didn't become a Christian till I was about 31, okay, and Jill a few years later, and it would have been lovely to have known what we know now and what we're hearing from you as well at that young age. But but it's just great to listen to you. I'm going to ask you one last question, if that's okay. Yeah.
Oh.
And that is, what's the most important piece of advice that you would give to Christian parents as they're raising their kids, in this generation in particular? What's the most important piece of advice would you give?
I think I've got two.
Yeah, go on, share two.
I think the first one is probably really obvious, but be a praying parent. Pray for your kids every day, and don't just pray for their maths exam or for their to have a nice friend, but pray for their spiritual well-being. Pray for them to never have a day where they depart from, Christ's rule. Pray for them to be growing and being filled with the Spirit daily. Pray for their future spouses, that they would be people that love Jesus. Like, pray for your kid in all ways, all the time. And the other one, I think, is just probably so vital, but something that it can be easy to forget. I think people get, like, we love our kids and we can get really wrapped up in them, but don't neglect your marriage if you're in one, and your spiritual walk, your walk with Jesus, and the health of your marriage is more important than like how you're parenting today, because those things, it's like building blocks, isn't it? It's like it needs to be our relationship with God, our marriage if we're in one, and then our parenting, and you can't flip it over. It won't be
No.
it'll topple. So don't start thinking that your kids are more important than your own relationship with Jesus, your own marriage.
Because parenting will come out of your relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, there'll be an overflow. Yeah.
And your marriage. Because if there's no relationship with Jesus, if there's no happy marriage, that will have an influence on the children.
Yeah.
Whereas, I hear exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Katie, thank you very much indeed. This has been great to have this conversation, to
Thanks
listen.
for having me.
Yeah. And, none of us, you're not there sort of claiming to know everything. You're on a journey. You and Rhodri are on a journey. Yeah. You're on a journey, both of you, and you're doing your best. And you're just sharing with others what you've learned so far, what the key principles are, what's important to you, what you've learned as Christian parents, just with the hope that it will help in some way and encourage in some way other Christian parents who are in exactly, or they don't have to be Christian parents, because the principles are there, they're godly principles, are there to help them on their journey because we all want healthy kids. We all want rounded kids and, kids that will walk into the fullness of what God has got for them in following Jesus. So you've done a great job this morning. I've enjoyed it. So I hope you have. If any parents want to get in touch with you, are you open for that?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, very happy.
Yeah, how would they do that? I can put stuff on the screen, or I can put stuff in the description for the video. How would parents get in touch with you?
I can give you my email. That'd probably be the best way.
Okay, I'll put that up on the screen. Okay.
Yeah.
And then any parent can chat with you. So, Katie, thank you very much indeed. Okay.
Yeah, nice to see you. Thank you.
Okay. God bless. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.